Breaking news concerning the U.S. economy.
Official figures show that
What's
more than
So I've been having this ongoing conversation with my daughter, Novella, who's 7 years old, and she's really proud that she's 7. She's recently 7. And I just keep telling her, I'm like, well, you know, we're not that far apart. I'm not that much older than you. I'm only 37 years old. That's pretty young. She's like, Dad, that is so old. I'm like, no, 37, that's only 30 years older than you. And she's like, Dad, that is so old. I'm like, no, it's not that old. And so we've been having this kind of argument back and forth about how young I am. And we were driving in the car the other day, and she was ready for my argument. I was like, hey, Novella, how old are you? She's like, 7. I'm like, I'm only 37. I'm pretty young. And she goes, no, Dad, you are so old. And I'm like, no, I'm 37. She just goes, 1. I said, what are you doing? 2. 3. Novella, stop it. 4. Novella, stop it. 5. I said, stop it. And she did not stop till she got to 37, and she made her point and won the argument. I love learning more and more about my daughter in this crazy world that we're in. How are you guys doing? You guys doing okay? I hope you're well, and I hope you and your family are doing okay. We've been in this series called How to Find Peace of Mind, and the theme verse we're looking at is a statement by Jesus. It says this: I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Isn't that verse awesome? God wants us to have a life. The Greek term is Zoe life. And that is a life of overflowing abundance and goodness. And the way we've defined it is Zoe life is a life of wholeness and peace. That's what God wants for us. And in these important dimensions, not only these, but especially these: mental health, relational health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. And today we're just going to be answering this question: how do I help my friends and family whose mental health is suffering? How do I help? Sometimes we can feel so inadequate or, untrained and unskilled. And, we don't want to pretend to be experts when we're not. We let the experts be experts, but we are part of a community of love and healing, and we're moving on a journey toward wholeness and health together with Jesus. And so we want to help others. So what does that look like? Now, these 4 responses are seen in the story of Jesus and this man in spiritual and mental darkness. But I think we see these 4 responses today in our culture, in our society, and individuals. These 4 responses can be very, very common, where you want to run away and abandon. You want to restrain and just remove the problem, or you want to ignore and send them away. But how do we learn to get to this response of help and healing? How do we help our friends and family? And let's jump into the story and look at the insights from this story with Jesus. Mark 5, chapter 1. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. Now, when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out of the tombs to meet him. Imagine with me the disciples coming from a storm where they almost died. I mean, they just had this crazy moment where a storm almost killed them. Jesus calms the storm, and they have this spiritual death moment, and they're alive, and you can just see them just jumping onto dry land, we made it. Oh man, Jesus, that was amazing, but I'm ready to just go get some food and relax. And right when Jesus jumps on the land, a man runs out of the local cemetery. He runs out of the tombs. We know from the story that he's got no clothes on. He's out of his mind. He's in total spiritual darkness, and he comes running up to Jesus. And in the story, he begins shrieking at them. And you can just see the disciples processing this after being in the storm, after being on the sea, and just thinking, Jesus, why can't you be like the other rabbis? Why can't you just answer some tough theological doctrinal questions here and there? Why can't you just, create like a real strong, rabbi program where it's step 1, step 2, step 3? Why couldn't you just make it something like that? Why couldn't you be like the other rabbis? If someone gets unruly or they're breaking the social codes, that you just remove them, you just have them taken, away from the group. It'd be so much easier. But see that Jesus, the way he disciples is like whole life discipleship. It's discovery discipleship with real life, and the doctrine you learn, it really matters. And so Jesus teaches them how to deal with the things that really come up, like mental and spiritual darkness. And Jesus wouldn't get back in the boat. He wouldn't let the guy go back to the tombs before he helped and healed him. And it's really easy, I think, to want to run back to the boat. I mean, I can understand that from the disciples' perspective. But Jesus shows us a different way. Let's keep moving on in the story. In verse 3, the man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. I mean, it's so easy to in our culture and in their culture, just want to chain and restrain. And that really is, there's moments where someone might need to be restrained because of an episode or what they're going through. Like there are moments where that is necessary, and there's sometimes boundaries that need to be put and limits, and those can be healthy things, but it's not a good long-term strategy just to, like in this situation, chain and restrain somebody, because that's not going to take them toward health. It's going to keep them in a certain spot. And then look at what happens. Whenever he was put into the chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. For if our only strategy is like to chain and restrain, chains and restraining like shackles, they're meant to be broken. Limits and boundaries. If we don't have a strategy that's going to help someone toward health and maturity and growth, wholeness and peace, people are going to find a way to break through those boundaries, those limits, those restraints. Let's keep looking at this story. So no one was strong enough to subdue him. In verse 5, day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. I mean, this man is in such spiritual and mental anguish. I mean, he's not thinking clearly, and he's hurting himself. And the strategy by the society and the culture has been to really exile him to the tombs. It's kind of this mentality of send him away and ignore him. Like, let's just try to ignore and pretend as if he doesn't exist. And that's not a good long-term strategy either. And it's certainly not going to help someone regain wholeness and health and move toward peace. In verse 6, it says this: when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him. And Jesus wouldn't leave him and wouldn't jump in the boat, wouldn't send him back to the tombs, didn't exile him, didn't just restrain him as like some long-term strategy. And Jesus helped him and he healed him. And in the story, this miraculous healing occurs. And we know it's in our world there, as a Christian, I've seen and I know that God can heal someone miraculously, but often it's through a natural process, not just supernatural. And it's through doctors. It can be through medicine. It can be through relationships and counseling. And I mean, there's a holistic approach that happens. And we see Jesus using approaches like this in his ministry. And I just think it's really important to recognize that. But this man is healed. And if we picked up the story in verse 15, look at what happens to this man's life. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw that the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, he was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane. This man he's not been himself. He's been in spiritual, mental, emotional darkness. Physically, he's harmed himself, and he encounters Jesus and he's healed. Jesus helps and heals him. That's Jesus' response. And I just think it's really, really powerful that Jesus, he had an agenda. He probably wanted to get somewhere, but he helped people along the way. He didn't let it stop him from his agenda. It didn't let him stop him from the path to the cross and the path to the resurrection, but the journey and the path is as important as the destination. Who we're becoming is as important as what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. And Jesus takes time to help and heal. And I think that says something to us. Are we willing to notice people and to care for them? And Jesus sees this man. He cares for this man, and he shares his time, and he shares his ability to heal him and restore him. And because Jesus restores him spiritually and mentally and emotionally, he's restored relationally to all the people and to his worshiping community and to his family. It's this amazing moment. And I don't want us to miss that Jesus takes that time. Do we see care, and are we willing to share with people in our life what we have to help them toward wholeness? Now look at the response of the people to this healing and wholeness and peace that Jesus brings. At the end of verse 15, it says what? And they, all the society and all the people, were all afraid. They were terrified. Well, why? It goes on to say in verse 16, then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And Jesus had cast out these demons, and the pigs had gone over the cliff. And, you guys know the story if you've been following along with us. And in verse 17, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to stay? No. Jesus does this miraculous healing. Jesus doing amazing things. And they're afraid of him. They plead with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Why? Well, I think there's a few things that are very human in this. Why would someone ask Jesus, who's healing and the power of God is just flowing through him and he's changing the world? Why would people be afraid of him and plead with him to leave, to go away? Well, I think one reason is the power of Jesus can just freak people out sometimes. Like if Jesus brings something supernatural into our life that we're not expecting, we're used to just like ordinary natural things, it can freak you out, And so there's some natural response to have a little bit of fear. And I know the Bible, Christians will use like those verses like, fear not, be strong and courageous, have no fear. But that's not acknowledging the context. Like, of course, we're going to have natural fear with some things, and fear is going to lurch up. The reason that whatever author is writing in scripture to be courageous or to not have fear, when Paul says, don't be afraid, he's saying that because he knows we have fear, is teaching us how to have faith in the midst of our fears. And the other thing I think is really important to recognize is when Jesus is moving in our lives and he's changing us and he's transforming us, it reveals there are areas that we are not in control of, and only God is in control of. Only Jesus is in control of. Like none of the society, none of the individuals, none of the families had control over this man or the situation or his need for healing. None of them could heal him. And none of them could really contain him. They didn't know what to do. And Jesus comes along and with a word puts everything right and brings peace, calms the internal storm. He's able to calm the external storm on the sea. He calms and brings peace to the internal storm of this man. And that causes a new storm and more anxiety in these people. They're freaking out because it reveals that just how little control they have. And sometimes when God's at work in our life, it reveals just how little control we have, and we can freak out that we don't have control, or we can learn to have peace and say, okay, God, I'm not in control, and that's okay. I'm not God, and you are, and I'm okay with that. Another thing is, another reason that people can kind of freak out and want to tell God to get out of their life is it disrupts the social norms and the status quo. When God shows up, he begins transforming and changing things and changing people and healing people. And there are some relationships and there's some dynamics in society where we really don't want the status quo to change. We like the social norms. We like the status that we've earned and that other people haven't earned yet. Sometimes we cling to that, and there's codependencies that are created where someone's dependent on a weakness or an addiction or a sickness in someone's life. And when they're healed, all of a sudden they don't have their identity anymore, and the codependency is revealed. And I think that there's some dynamics like that in this story. There's unconscious codependency happening. And it also reveals guilt. Like, maybe I should have done something different, or man, I did abandon, and I just wanted to ignore him, or we've just been wanting to restrain him. And I didn't really believe that God wanted or would heal him. I thought maybe it was his own fault that he was sick. And then Jesus coming and healing this man reveals all of that hogwash for what it was, and all of the fear and all of the lack of courage. And so there's guilt sometimes. And so like Jesus, I don't want to be reminded, I don't want to have the mirror of who I really am, held up to me right now. And then lastly, it cost these people financially. 2,000 pigs getting, like having demons cast them and falling over a cliff and losing all this huge herd of pigs. Scholars have said that is about a year's supply of food. I mean, think about that. That's a lot of food, a year's supply. It cost them something, cost them time and energy, and cost them money. That's an economic hardship. The many were suffering for the healing of the few, or the one. And there's a tension there. Jesus, who is the one who died for the many, is in this moment, he is sacrificing the economy of the many for the one. And there's a tension. And that means that the culture, the society, was going to have to learn to be innovative, creative, to make that up. Because God doesn't want a whole society to, like dwindle and die. But there is a reality. If we're going to help people and we're going to serve people who are struggling, hurting, broken, or without, if we are going to help them, it costs us something. And that means that we have to be creative, we have to be innovative, we have to trust that God will take care of us and not let fear drive us. There's an abundance, not a scarcity. Our God will provide for us. So, how do I help friends and family members whose mental health is suffering? Jesus was always teaching his disciples some key lessons. One of the key lessons he was teaching the religious and his own disciples was this. He said, learn what it means that I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Learn what that means. And I think this is really important. Religion removes. Relationship renews. Religion has a tendency to want to cut off and remove the people and the situations that just I don't want to deal with. They're sinful. It's I don't want to get infected with the sin that they have, or I don't want to deal with the issues that they have. It's really messy. So there's this tendency to remove, or to, like a surgeon, just cut off everything and cut the limb off and just get it out. But Jesus comes to renew. He didn't come to bring religion. He came to get rid of religion and bring relationship with God and others. And so he's in the business of renewing, of restoring. And he's trying to save everything he can. If there's an infection, how do we save every aspect of this person and not just try to start hacking off limbs? How do we not just run to the boat? How do we not just abandon? How do we not just restrain and chain people into this world of sickness that they're in, or unhealth? And Jesus really wants to help and heal, because he seeks mercy, not sacrifice. It's so easy to run back to the boat and abandon someone. It's so easy to just ignore and just abandon someone to the tombs. My father-in-law, I shared this last week. My father-in-law had a stroke, and the whole right side of his brain had an aneurysm, and he was in the hospital. The doctors thought he was going to die, and in the middle of that, there were friends that he and his wife, Chris, were relying on. They thought for sure these people would be with him. And it was shocking how many people saw Stan in a situation, in the mental, spiritual, emotional darkness that he was in. And they didn't know how to handle it, and they ran to the boats. Some people just were they came and they didn't know what to do. They didn't have the training for it. And it was so awkward for them that we didn't hear anything from him, just kind of abandoned him to the tombs. And that was really hard for them, because there were people that they thought, man, I thought you were in this with us. But the most amazing thing was there were some people that were it was some of the most surprising people, like neighbors who they didn't know that well, and old friends, and some family members that had never kind of risen to the occasion, that saw the state he was in. They cared about it, and they came and they had the courage to serve him. And there were people that, they didn't run the boat, they didn't leave him in the tombs, and they were there with Stan throughout his recovery. They were checking with him, they were helping him, just in tangible ways, helping him. And they weren't experts. They weren't the ones who were doing all the physical therapy. They weren't the ones helping him work through some of the therapy on the brain work that needed to be done. But in every way they could, they shared what they had. And I just want to encourage you, if you're wanting to know, how do I help someone who might be struggling spiritually and mentally? Let me give you 3 really practical and important ways. And we see Jesus doing this. And here they are. They're simply these 3 things: see, care, and share. The first one is see. And that's simply to have empathy, just to have empathy. We all have some degree of mental unhealth and mental health, where, mental health isn't just a category, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum. And we all have areas that we're doing well and areas that we're not. And so we're all in the same boat. The next one is to care. And we need to care for people. We need to just show love. It might sound real simple, but when we show love, we're actually taking our empathy and we're beginning to act on it. We're caring about people. We are authentic with who we are, and we care about people authentically. And we're not the medical experts, or very few of us are medical experts, and we shouldn't pretend to be or act like we are. But we are called to love, and we can help people. And so when we care and we show love, we begin to have a heart to help. We become broken people who are loving other broken people. And that leads us to the third thing, is to share. Sharing requires having the courage to reach out and help. Help often starts when you just reach out, you notice, you see that something going on, you care about it, and you step out and you say, I'm going to share my story. I'm going to be open with what I'm going through, and you share from what you have. I'm not a medical expert, but I have some time, or I know of some resources, and you share out of what you have. Maybe that's some time. Maybe that's a listening ear, and maybe that's helping connect them to someone who can help them, who is an expert in the area that they need. And I just want to encourage you to do those 3 things, and to notice people, like really look and see who's struggling and care about it, and then share out of what you have and connect them to the help that they need. We have a PDF that you can click on the link below, and it has resources for you. It has simple resources that can just help you kind of have a diagnostic of where you are in your spiritual and mental and emotional health. It also has a resource with our church if you need someone to pray with you or just listen to you and maybe talk with you. We have that resource. And then we also have resources for counselors. And if you need a counselor, someone that can begin doing some of the emotional, mental, and soul work that may be needed in your life, you can get connected to a counselor. So click on that link and get the help you need. And friends, let's not abandon our friends to the tombs. Let's not run back to the boat. Let's help people the best we can. See, care, and share. It's really easy to have the impulse to run away, to run to the boat, to leave someone in the tombs. But it's so important that we don't abandon people. And I have a friend who's going to share her story, and it's a story where she had friends who didn't abandon her and stayed with her, and they helped and were part of the healing process. Check out my friend's story.
My name is Renelle Whalen, and I have gone through quite a journey of mental health issues. I come by it real naturally. My great-grandma was a catatonic schizophrenic. She stopped speaking after the loss of a child and was institutionalized the rest of her life. And my grandma had shock treatments and over and over. And then my dad was bipolar, which is, maybe what both my grandmothers had as well. And I really struggled with depression during every pregnancy because of the hormones. And in me, the depression showed up as very angry and very bitter, and I blamed everybody else for my problems. And so my marriage was a disaster. Mike and I have been married for 26 years now, and the first 15 were miserable. I made life miserable for pretty much everybody in my household. I have a really good friend, and she just she was such a life support to me. She just kept saying, Renelle, you can't blame everything on everybody else. She says, you can't change their behavior, but you can change your own behavior through the power of the Holy Spirit, because there's really nothing I could do. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be kind and nice and friendly, but I just absolutely couldn't. I think that the most helpful things were fellowship, having somebody that I could just pour out all the good, bad, ugly, and have them listen and still say, but you are responsible to do this because you live for Christ. And I think being in church, being in the Word every day, praise music, I needed medication to even get to a place where I was able to want change, because I was so in despair at times. I'm a strong believer that broken minds need medicine, just like broken bodies do. And so I've been on antidepressants since I was pregnant with my third child. I have not. Well, I've tried to go off and just plummeted out of control. So I kind of know that, that's just kind of going to be part of who I am. And that's fine with me. People take medications for other things. And so I'm good with it. I struggled with it for a while. You hate to need something to be okay. But I'm a big proponent nowadays. And I did do counseling repeatedly over the years, and just sought out every single thing I could that would give me a whole mind. It didn't happen quickly for me. I wanted to just be instantly healed and be a super nice person, and that was not the situation at all. It was slow, and it was failing a lot, and then just running to God and being, just heartbroken over what I kept doing. You hear these miraculous stories, and I was mad, when I'd hear those stories for a long time. I was just mad. I was like, God, why not me? Why can't I just be instantly better? But the real truth is he wanted me to depend on him. I can be very independent, like I said, very type A personality, do this. I could not control myself, and it brought me to a place of complete dependence. I had nothing in myself that could fix this. For other people that struggle, just know that there's hope, and really, with Holy Spirit's power, there's the ability to change too. You don't have to live defeated every day. It's possible to live beyond it, and I still struggle with it. During this COVID-19 stuff, I kind of had another little bout, but I know where to go now. Depression is not something you can do alone. There have to be people that support you and believe in you and hold you accountable. Again, like I said, you can't do it alone, so talk to somebody.
If you or anyone you know are really struggling with mental and emotional health and you need help now, today, call today. Call this number, the Pierce County Crisis Line. Call this number. And then the second step is just tell somebody you trust. Make sure you tell somebody you trust and open up. You're not meant to carry these burdens alone. You need to be able to open up with somebody and have them walk alongside the journey with you. We have a team of listeners, people who will spiritually listen. They're not going to solve your problems. They'll listen. You can set up appointments to actually be listened to process, and to receive prayer. And we also have a PDF that can just help you process your emotions with a friend or on your own. And it just has some great resources for you for mental health and spiritual health. And I want to encourage you to utilize that. You can just click on the link below. Guys, I love you so much. And let's worship in this next portion together.